Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. Michael's trips across the states typically involved addressing technical matters. When clients presented special requests that the regular sales team couldn't handle, they relied on him to visit and consult directly. His extensive knowledge of the industry and renowned technical expertise made him the preferred choice for customers with unique specifications who trusted him to personally oversee their projects. Michael was also highly inventive, and if he deemed a client's request impossible to achieve with the existing machinery, impractical or too costly, he often devised an alternative solution within 24 hours. His deep understanding of design allowed him to not only meet but frequently exceed his customers' expectations. Well-known and well-liked, Michael was admired and respected by both his employers and employees. He had a reputation as a fair and just manager who wasn't afraid to challenge the prestigious board of directors on behalf of his team when he believed it was justified. At the same time, he was equally prepared to explain practical and economic realities to his employees when their demands were unreasonable. Under his leadership, the knitting department had never gone on strike and their productivity remained unmatched. Michael was a quintessential all-American man, deeply patriotic and devoted to his country. He took great pride in the United States and felt profound shame towards so-called American companies that outsourced manufacturing to China, costing countless Americans their jobs. In his view, American workers could produce a superior product efficiently, albeit at a slightly higher cost, though not so much higher as to justify the economic suffering it cost. While offshore manufacturing might yield higher dividends for shareholders, Michael firmly believed in prioritizing his fellow Americans first, especially in a time of record-high unemployment. A man of faith, though not a regular churchgoer, Michael held strong convictions about life being more than a pursuit of wealth. He was not one to bow to the power of money or to those who wielded it in excess. His values were rooted in fairness, loyalty, and the belief in taking care of one's own community. If asked about his life, Michael would readily describe himself as blessed. He cherished his wife, Sophie, a 35-year-old he deeply adored and admired for her honor and unwavering support. Together, they had 2 children, Robert, 16, and Emily, 14, who completed the picture of a life he felt fortunate to live. Michael also considered himself fortunate to have 2 remarkable children. They were well-mannered, respectful to their elders, and excelled academically, consistently earning top grades. Both were talented athletes and carried themselves with dignity. No tattoos, piercings, or brightly colored hair adorned their appearances. While they enjoyed weekends out and attended parties, they were responsible, always returning home sober, drug-free, and before curfew. However, Michael often surprised those who knew him by admitting that he was dissatisfied with his professional life. Despite his success, he had always dreamed of owning his own business, a knitting plant where he could oversee every aspect of the operation, a role he found deeply fulfilling. While he currently handled much of the business's intricacies, the reality of working under a CEO meant that, ultimately, his decisions could be overruled. Even if he made a strong case, a no from the CEO was final, leaving him with little recourse but to accept it or consider finding another job. Each time he had broached the subject with Sophie of raising capital to start his own business, Sophie would inevitably have a reason why they couldn't afford it at that time, and the usual reason had to do with something that the kids needed or they needed to move to a new house or something. Sometimes Michael felt Sophie would look for any reason to keep him in his secure job, and even to a not overly sensitive man like Michael, it was obvious she feared he would fail to make a success of his own business. She preferred he remain an employee where he made a good salary with bonuses and share options and little or no risk of their money involved. When they were courting, she seemed as excited as he and encouraged him by making suggestions, and they would talk into the night how they would create this wonderful company. When he had saved a sufficient amount for a deposit on a home and they married, he again brought up the subject with Sophie, but she said that she wanted to have her children early and then enter the workforce when the youngest had reached 5, and then she would be earning some money to keep them and he would be free to pursue his dream without undue pressure to produce an immediate income. He remembered hugging and kissing her and telling her over and over that she would never regret it, and he was so lucky to have such a supportive wife. She almost immediately became pregnant with Robert, and when he was about 1 year 6 months old, she became pregnant with Emily. Michael searched for a better job, and already well known in the trade as an up-and-coming man in design, he was almost immediately hired by Ridgefield Textiles, a highly respected company in the trade, first as the factory manager, and he grew from there. Sophie mentioned it was now time to move to a bigger house. Michael spoke with Sophie again in the 7th year when she had settled into a new job, but she said that there was a better area that they could move to that had an excellent public school for the children. Michael insisted that they get a public school education. So he really couldn't start a new business until the kids were settled, and anyway they would need his income to qualify for the mortgage. Finally, Michael gave up and thought that until the children had finished university there would always be a reason that he couldn't start his own business, but when they both graduated, no matter what the excuse, he was going to go ahead and realize his dream, and if Sophie didn't like it, well, it would just be tough luck. Michael wanted to pursue his ideas, his designs with his capital, and be answerable to no one other than himself and the Lord. He was sure he could expand Ridgefield Textiles if it was his own and create more jobs. Another part of this adolescent dream was to build the most modern factory in the world that would satisfy his company needs, but also the needs of his employees as well, for much depended on their capabilities and their loyalty, and they should be recognized as such. His dream would make them all shareholders of the business, so they would be directly involved in its success, and the more they succeeded, the more they should be entitled to gain from the sweat of their brow. There should be no misinterpretation in Michael's philosophy in life. He was no soft-touch liberal, quite the opposite. He believed that if you treated your employees with respect and showed them that if they were prepared to work hard and sometimes sacrifice their time off for the benefit of the company, they should be well rewarded in direct proportion to their contribution to the success of the company. Their self-esteem would be considerably higher, as in fact they would be almost self-employed, and it would reflect in their work, and they would have to consider the progress of the company in their demands for a better salary or working conditions. David believed that there should be almost total harmony between the suits and the employees on the shop floor, resulting in a higher return on the investment made in them by the company and naturally boosting the bottom line. No, David was an extremely ambitious man who didn't understand the logic that he should get to keep all the profits even though he had put up the funds, risk factor, and that no one would share in its loss, but this way they would share in the company's bad times just as much as in the good times. Michael was feeling quite tired, as he always tried to get home as soon as his business was finished, and though he was only 75 miles from home, he decided that he would stop for an hour or so in the next town he came to. Michael had a strange metabolism. You would think that he would be searching for a diner for something to eat and some coffee, but that didn't seem to affect Michael's alertness as much as a shot or two of bourbon. He always carried a gizmo that would give him his alcohol-blood ratio, as if he lost his license he would be completely devastated, and anyway he always, though supposed to knock someone over or had a car accident, he would never forgive himself. He was approaching Topeka, the state capital. He had been there many times and knew it quite well, but he wanted to rest up in a nice, quiet, secluded bar. It was quite late, but he knew rushing home would not find him next to Sophie enjoying a session of frantic love-making, as always happened on his return from a trip, as she was usually fast asleep at this time after her Friday night out with her work friends. This night out was a new phenomenon in their life together, but Sophie said that it relaxed her no end. Just laughing and joking, and the amount of men that would buy them drinks and flirt with them was quite a revelation to her. She said she was the most popular of the girls amongst these would-be Romeos, and subsequently was bought far too many drinks and was dragged on the dance floor so many times it did her self-esteem so good that at her age she could still attract that many men, and even those that were considerably younger than her. He had laughed at her and asked her if she had taken a good look at herself in the mirror recently. Her long curled blonde hair and warm blue eyes were a good place to start. Her cheeky snub nose and full ruby red lips advanced her claim to beauty. Then there was those beautiful legs perched on 4-inch stilettos that she wore at all times, as she claimed that they helped define her legs better and brought her height up to around 5 feet 9 inches against his muscular 6 feet 1 inch frame. Her thighs were generous and firm while her feet were petite. Michael was a handsome man in his own right, and he had more than one invitation from amongst his female employees, especially at the annual office party, when he would sneak away from the management party where all and sundry would spend the night sucking up to the CEO and the directors on the board and go off and join the employees' party on the shop floor. He knew that they appreciated this gesture as no other manager would dream of joining them. The truth was that Michael enjoyed their party more than with the suits. They seemed to have a lot more fun, and there was always a lot more laughter. Michael noticed a neon-lit sign directing to a bar named Alone and Happy. While he had never been there before and it was highly unlikely he would bump into somebody he knew, so directing his Chevrolet Regal LX 3.5 T4-wheel drive that he had picked up in Detroit and was 100% made in America, he turned right and he noticed the small boutique hotel almost immediately on his right-hand side. He drew up to an arrow pointing right for patron parking only and turned in to find an out-of-the-way spot so no drunk would nick his beautiful $60,000 2010 GM manufactured Chevrolet. He switched off the ignition and looking in the mirror and dragged a comb across his hair. Boy, did he look tired then. Before getting out of the car, he reached his hand into the glove compartment and drew out an imposing Smith & Wesson .375 Magnum that he always took on his trips in case of muggings or theft, and a pair of gloves that he would wear as it was a cold night. He never left his pistol unattended because the cautious man that he was, he considered, what if someone stole his car and found his gun and used it to hold up a store? Getting out of the car, he stuck the gun inside his trouser belt at the small of his back and covered it with his jacket. His father had taught him how to use and respect firearms at a young age. Michael was a very good shot and had earned trophies and cups to prove it. When he married Sophie, she convinced him to sell his weapon, as she didn't like firearms in the house, and they frightened her, and Michael respected her wishes. Then when he was mugged on one of his trips to New Jersey, he applied for and received a license to carry a gun again and bought a .375 Magnum, and though he hadn't lost his ability with a pistol, he had to admit that he didn't really need to be that good a shot, as his new pistol obliterated everything around it, especially if it was loaded with 125-grain semi-jacketed hollow points bullets as his was, but you had to grip strongly with both hands because the recoil it produced could quite easily find you lying on your back. Michael stretched his body luxuriously, getting all the little knots that had gathered after being in the same position for too long, then locked the car and made his way to the back door entry of the bar. Even though he had been driving at night, he still needed to close his eyes for 10 seconds to accustom them to the ambient lighting of the bar, which was extremely low. He let his eyes wander around the bar, and though it was very attractively laid out with intimate seating arrangements of semicircle booths with leather semicircle sofas, it was so extremely discreet that it was difficult to make out who the occupants in the booths were. It didn't take Michael long to realize that he had stumbled on a pickup joint and/or a discreet place where cheaters could hide their shame. Now David was not a judgmental man. He strongly believed in the saying in the Bible, "You that are without sin cast the first stone," but this was not his scene, so as to speak, what they did was their business, but it was not something that he himself would do or condone, so he decided it was better that he found somewhere more conducive to his taste, and just as he turned his back to leave, he heard the sound of laughter coming from the other side of the bar where the intimate booths were located. Michael stopped dead in his tracks. He knew that laughter anywhere, and he had absolutely no doubt that it was the sound of his wife laughing. What was his wife doing so far from home and in such a place? Who was she with? He hadn't noticed her car in the car park, but he hadn't been looking for it. David turned back and walked up to the bar. Cooley sat on a bar stool, his eyes trying to make out who was with her and searching for some reason for her to be there while dismissing the obvious. Had she come for an event arranged by a friend or something and forgotten to tell him? Sure, and pigs might fly, he thought to himself. What will it be? The bartender asked Michael. Make it a shot of Wild Turkey 101, please, Michael replied automatically. You got good taste. We don't have many people ordering that particular brand. It's a connoisseur's drink. You must know your bourbons well. You got that right. Help yourself to a drink while you're at it. Michael offered generously. If you don't mind, I'll take the money for it now and drink it later. I'll have a beer if that's okay. Knock yourself out. David responded as the bartender went to pour his shot. You know, sir, make that, David. No one has knighted me yet, and somehow I doubt they ever will, David said. Okay, David, I might sell this particular brand of bourbon about 10 times a month, and yet tonight I've sold it to 2 different people. Mind you, the other person I sold it to comes here maybe twice a month on average, and I can tell you she is one good-looking lady. The bartender told Michael. Does she come by herself? Because if not, I might go over and chat to her. Michael said searchingly, still trying to make out who she was seated with. I hate to tell you this, but you wouldn't stand a chance. Really, and why would that be? Is she married and with her husband? Michael asked. Married definitely, though no rings, and always with the same man each time, and they always sleep the night, leaving the next morning. What makes you think she's married? Michael queried. When you've been in this business as long as I have, cheaters might as well have it tattooed on their forehead. Besides, her lover looks to be about 10 years her junior. How strange that such a good-looking woman would choose a boy as her lover. David thought out aloud. You see it all the time, and that's not all. I have seen her give him a few expensive gifts, like a necklace, a bracelet, and a ring, all 18 karat. Gold, not plated, the real thing. Undoubtedly paid for by her schmo of a husband who probably breaks his balls working, so she buy her lover little treats as proof of her affection. It makes me wanna throw up. I can tell you, and a nicer woman to talk with as you could ever meet, it's a crying shame. The bartender said in some disgust. Michael, over here, a patron at the other end of the bar, shouted, "Yes, sir, right away." "Excuse me, David, but I'd better get back to work. It's been a pleasure talking to you." Michael said, "Right back at you, Michael." David replied as Michael made his way to the other side of the bar. On his own, David took a sip of his drink, savoring the taste as it burned down to his belly, helping to relieve the bile that was rising, and as if making up his mind, he went outside where he couldn't be heard or seen and rang his home phone number. "Hello, this is the Bennett residence. Robert speaking." "Hi, Bob, how are things on the home front?" Michael asked. "Oh, hiya, Dad, didn't expect to hear or see from you until tomorrow. How is everything on the road? Are you having a successful trip?" Robert replied, the pleasure of speaking to his dad evident in his voice. "Why would you be expecting me tomorrow? It's Friday today, and that is when I said I'd be back." Michael replied, ignoring his son's question. "Dad, you've got your days mixed up. Today is Thursday, tomorrow is Friday. Heck, I must have missed out on a client. How on earth could I have made such a stupid mistake?" Michael replied, upset that he would now have to turn around and see the client he had missed. "Where are you talking from?" Bob asked. Michael thought for a minute if he told Bob the truth, it would undoubtedly get back to Sophie, and that was something he didn't want her to know right now. He decided to ignore the question and instead asked, "Put your mom on the phone, I'd like to have a chat with her." "Sorry, no can do. Mom said something about needing to spend the night with Grandma and wouldn't be back until tomorrow." "Well, I can always get her on her cell phone, I suppose." "Nope, Dad, you can't do that. Either she's forgotten it by the hall phone, then I'll call her at her mom's," David said, getting frustrated. "Dad, she told me and Emily that her mom wasn't feeling well, and only in the case of a dire emergency to call there, as we might wake up Grandma, and Mom didn't want her to be disturbed. She said she might call in later when she had her mom settled for the night, but not to bother staying up just in case it was too late. Would you like to leave a message just in case she phones?" Bob asked helpfully. "No, Bob, thanks for the offer, but there really isn't anything that can't wait until tomorrow." "Has Emily gone to bed?" "Yes, Dad, about an hour ago. She should be asleep by now." "I wonder which customer you missed and why they didn't phone you from work?" Bob asked, concerned. "I must be going senile. I've seen all the clients but one finished up real early, and I have been feeling tired lately, so I went to sleep, and that must be when I got my days mixed up. It'll be late when I get home tonight, so I'll see you tomorrow. Give Emily a kiss for me. I think I'd rather die." "Come on, Bob, you're almost a man now. There is no need for you to say things like that about your little sister. Remember, you're the man of the house when I'm away." "I'm only teasing. I know she's a good girl for a 14-year-old, that is." "Yes, old wise sage. Now get yourself off to bed too. It is beyond your bedtime, my young man. Goodbye, and take care of yourself and little Emily while we are both away." "It must be some emergency for Mom to leave you both," David said concerningly. "Don't worry about a thing. I've got everything under control. You just get back home. We all miss you. Bye, Dad, and good luck. If you're getting tired, why don't you find yourself a motel for the night and get home tomorrow instead?" Robert suggested. "Sounds like a plan. I might just do that. Bye." And David closed the phone before going back into the bar. He was determined to see who was with her, but he didn't want her to know she had been caught out. "Hit me again, please, Michael." And as Rick poured him another shot and took the money for it that David had left on the bar, he just waited. He could now make out his wife quite clearly, and she was made up to the hilt. She looked absolutely stunning in a low-cut red cocktail dress. For her to go to such lengths for Michael these days usually warranted a special occasion, obviously not so for her lover, but then he guessed if they only met a couple of times a month, each time she must consider his special. How he wasn't in a complete turmoil was quite beyond him. There was no doubt that Sophie had made a cuck out of him, and not for the first time, was something that he couldn't deny. She had betrayed him and lied to him, took the family's money to spend on gold jewelry for another man. This was so out of character, and running on the assumption that the husband is always the last to know. He wondered how many of their friends or family knew about the set of horns he was wearing, and he couldn't help wondering why no one had told him. His thoughts were disturbed by the sound of the table where she was sitting scraping, which indicated that she had enough booze and wanted to get to the dessert and festivities, and while ensuring he was still well hidden from her, he finally got to see who was with her. He had to do a double take to ensure that what he was seeing was what he was seeing. The boy was one of their older friend's son Josh, and Sophie was behaving like a lovesick teenager, giggling at whatever he was telling her and all over him like a rash as they walked to the hotel reception to book a room. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett, and how are you and Mr. Bennett tonight?" the receptionist asked smilingly. "I'm feeling just great, and I have a distinct feeling that I'm going to be feeling a whole lot better in a little while," Sophie answered, squeezing Josh's hand as she looked up at him. "Will you be booking your usual room, Ms. Bennett? And where else would I go, Karen? I just love this place," Sophie replied. "Well, it's always a pleasure to see you, Ms. Bennett. Here are your keys. Do you need anything from room service that I can arrange to have sent up to you?" "No, not tonight, thank you. I think I've got all I need." "Do you have any luggage that Frank here can help you with?" Karen asked. "No, we'll just be staying the night, and I have everything I need right here in my vanity case. My nightwear is rather flimsy. Just how Josh likes it, isn't that right, honey?" Sophie said flirtingly. "Sure. Is Sophie?" "Sure is." And as they waited for the elevator flanked by Frank, who had escorted them, Michael saw something he never in his life dreamed he would ever see. Michael watched as his wife, Sophie, was pulled into another man's embrace and kissed passionately in full view of everyone. The man, Frank, seemed visibly uncomfortable, though Michael couldn't discern whether it was due to the kiss itself or the sight of a middle-aged woman acting with the unrestrained excitement of a teenager. It was an awkward scene, with their passionate display drawing attention. The kiss ended with Josh, the man Sophie was kissing, reaching down to rub and then playfully pinch her shapely figure. "Wait until I get you upstairs, Sophie. I've got something special for you tonight. Something a bit more than junior down there," Josh said loudly, his voice carrying across the room as he thrust his hips suggestively in her direction. The elevator arrived, and amidst giggles, the two stepped in together. Michael stood silently, watching the old-fashioned arrow indicator as the elevator climbed to the top floor of the small hotel. His heart ached as the humiliating scene unfolded before him, visible to everyone in the bar who chose to look. Yet outwardly, Michael betrayed no emotion. His face remained stoic and unreadable. After a moment of agonizing deliberation, he made up his mind and headed toward the reception desk. "Excuse me, ma'am," Michael said tentatively to Karen. "Yes, sir. How may I help you?" the pretty receptionist asked with a radiant smile on her face. "The couple who just checked into room 409, that wouldn't be Mr. and Miss Spencer, would it? They usually take that room, and they are friends of mine," Michael asked innocently. The room number Michael plucked from nowhere. He had absolutely no idea which was Sophie's usual room. "You have the room number, right? But that isn't Mr. and Miss Spencer." "I'm afraid I don't recall that name at all. But I am relatively new here. Would you like me to ask the manager if Mr. and Miss Spencer have checked in tonight, as I've only just come on duty?" Karen asked helpfully. "No, that's okay. It's just that the woman looked so much like Miss Spencer, though I must admit I didn't get a good look at her companion, and coming to think of it, he didn't have the same physique as Mr. Spencer. Thank you for the offer anyway. Will you want a room for tonight? We aren't very busy, Mr. the receptionist asked, trying to determine his name. "Michael. My name is Michael, and though I do feel a little tired, I'm only a few miles from home, so I think I'm up to driving the remainder of the way. Again, thanks for asking," Michael replied and turned back toward the bar. When he had gone a few steps, he glanced back and saw that Karen was headed in the direction of the back office, and Frank must have gone outside, as he was nowhere to be seen. So as he reached the bar, he tossed down the remainder of his drink, said goodnight to Michael, picked up his money, and put his gloves back on, and as the field was clear, he made his way to the elevator and pressed the button to summon it and watched its progress as it descended. He got in and punched the appropriate button, and standing with his back against the rear of the elevator was once deeper in thought. Providence, he thought, is a strange and wonderful thing, for it could only be Providence that was controlling events tonight, that wanted to warn him and show him things he never even suspected. It must be Providence that brought him to this small hotel. Maybe one could consider that as pure chance. But was it also pure chance that had his wife decide to come here with her lover on the exact same night, and was it pure chance that he got his days mixed up, and pure chance that the bartender discussed Sophie with him? A complete stranger, and again pure chance that he guessed the correct room number where she was staying the night with her lover, and could pure chance also ensure that the receptionist, Karen, was new and inexperienced, or she would have known better than to confirm Sophie's room. For him, the odds against such a series of the events happening solely through pure chance were probably incalculable. Providence's hand was in this of that. Michael was absolutely positive, and it would be Providence that would see how this night would end. The elevator doors opened at the top floor, and he was greeted with 2 sets of arrows, and the numbers 401 to 410 were to his right. Michael turned left and made his way down the hallway. He had no problem with locks. He could easily and quietly break into their room as long as the key wasn't in the lock on the other side of the door. All he needed was a credit card. As he approached 409, he took one out of his wallet, and as he turned to face the door, he noticed that "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging from the door handle. He also noticed that Josh had obviously not kicked the door hard enough for it to close, and it was still ever so slightly ajar. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.